Lena Harper had always been a fighter. Even as a child, she had been the one to stand up for herself, to protect those she loved, and to push through challenges that others couldn't even imagine. But nothing in her life had prepared her for what she was about to face. It was late on a chilly fall afternoon when everything changed. She was walking home from school, the scent of autumn leaves thick in the air. The path was quiet, lined with tall oak trees whose leaves had just begun to turn orange and gold. She smiled as the wind picked up, twirling a few leaves in the air before they danced across the road, finally landing at her feet. It was the perfect afternoon until it wasn't. Lena felt the change before she even saw it. A shadow crossed her path, and she froze. Something felt off, like the very air around her had shifted. She turned to look behind her, but the road was empty. Then, without warning, she felt a sharp tug on the back of her jacket, and before she could scream, a rough hand clamped over her mouth. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to struggle, but whoever was holding her was far too strong. She kicked and punched, but it was no use. Darkness overtook her as she was dragged into the trees. The last thing Lena remembered was the cold, harsh grip tightening, and then everything went black. 6 years had passed since that day. Lena's family, devastated by her disappearance, had never stopped searching. Her mother, a kind-hearted woman who always believed in miracles, had plastered the town with missing person posters. Her father had hired private investigators, scoured the woods where she had vanished, and even turned to local news channels for help. But no one had seen Lena since that afternoon. Her name was never far from the tongues of the townspeople. The mystery of Lena Harper's disappearance became one of those cases that lingered in the background, haunting everyone who remembered her. Some said she had run away. Others whispered that something terrible had happened. But one could imagine what it really was. Lena Harper had been buried alive. It started with a strange sensation in the pit of her stomach. Lena was lying in a confined space, cold earth pressing against her. She could hear the faintest sounds, a drip of water here, a scrape of dirt there. But it wasn't the earth or the darkness that had kept her alive for all this time. It was the memory of her family, the love of her friends, and the burning determination that kept her going. They had believed she was gone, but Lena knew she couldn't die. Not like this. She wasn't going to let the darkness swallow her. Fingers scraped the dirt, her nails torn and bloodied. She had no idea how long she had been in this suffocating grave, but her body was weak, her muscles aching, and her throat dry from thirst. The air around her was stale, filled with the smell of damp earth and decay. But through it all, she clung to one thought: she had to escape. She hadn't seen her captor since that day she had been dragged into the woods. The man who had taken her seemed to be watching her from a distance, but he never came close enough to finish what he had started. And over the years, Lena had grown used to the silence, to the dark, to the suffocating feeling of being trapped in a box beneath the ground. But no more. Lena clenched her fists. Her nails dug into the hard soil as she began to pound against the walls of her grave. She screamed, her voice muffled by the layers of earth above her. She had to get out. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't give up. Her mind raced back to the things she had learned in her survival class when she was younger. How to stay calm in emergencies. How to conserve energy. How to find a way to fight back even when it seemed impossible. With one final desperate push, Lena's hand broke through the surface of the dirt. The sound was faint at first, but it was enough. A crack in the coffin. A way out. Lena gasped for air. The cold, damp air hitting her lungs. She hadn't realized how much she had needed it until now. Her body was screaming for oxygen, her heart pounding in her chest. She shoved her hand deeper, digging with renewed energy. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Lena couldn't tell. She felt time slipping away, like sand through her fingers. Then, suddenly, the earth gave way. Lena gasped in shock as her entire body was thrust upward. Her eyes squeezed shut, her heart racing as she felt herself break through the surface. Finally free from the suffocating weight of the dirt. She didn't know how, but somehow she had managed to push herself up and out of her grave. She collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, her body trembling with exhaustion. But she was alive. She was free, and that's all that mattered. For the first time in years, Lena dared to look around. The landscape was eerily familiar. She had been buried in the woods behind her old house, the place where she had been taken all those years ago. The trees stood tall around her, their leaves whispering in the wind. Her old neighborhood was just beyond the tree line. She could almost see the houses in the distance, but something was wrong. The world looked different. There was no one around, no sound of cars, no voices. It was as if the town had been abandoned. Lena stumbled to her feet, her legs shaking beneath her. She could barely stand, but her instincts told her to move, to run. She didn't know where she was going, but the idea of being caught again was unbearable. She took a shaky step forward, then another. The familiar path that once led to her home was now foreign and dark. As she made her way through the woods, Lena could feel the weight of the years pressing down on her. 6 years of captivity, 6 years of darkness, and now 6 years of questions. Where was everyone? Had they moved? Had they forgotten about her? Or was something much worse happening? The town looked deserted. It was as though the entire world had shifted while she had been trapped underground. Lena's breath quickened as a chill swept through her body. Her heart pounded with confusion and fear. Lena had to know what had happened. She had to find answers. It didn't take long for Lena to reach the edge of the woods. Her feet, sore and bruised from her long ordeal, dragged across the gravel road. She stopped for a moment, catching her breath and glancing around. The streetlights flickered weakly in the distance, casting eerie shadows over the empty streets. No cars, no people. Everything was still. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold. A missing persons poster. It was on a nearby telephone pole, yellowed with age, torn at the edges. Her heart stopped as she read the words, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch the familiar image of herself. The poster read, "Missing, Lena Harper. Last seen October 16, 2015. Please contact the local authorities if you have any information." Lena felt a wave of nausea wash over her. 6 years. 6 years had passed, and yet the search for her was still active. Her face stared back at her from the faded paper, but there was no sign of hope in the eyes of the people who had once loved her. It was like she had never existed. The road stretched before her, empty and quiet. Lena's thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of the nightmare she had just escaped. Her body was bruised, weak, and drained of all energy, but her mind was sharp, pushing her forward with one single thought. She had to find out what happened. What had happened to her town? What had happened to her life? Lena took a deep breath and looked down the road. There was only one place to go now, one place where the answers might be waiting, her home. Lena's heart raced as she walked down the empty road. The familiar sights of her neighborhood should have felt like a comfort, but instead they filled her with a sense of dread. She couldn't understand it. Where was everyone? Her parents? Her friends? Had they really moved on, or was something more sinister at play? As she approached the first few houses, she noticed that many of them looked strangely abandoned. The lawns were overgrown, the windows dusty, and the mailboxes full. The houses themselves seemed to have aged beyond their years, as if they had been left in a hurry. She passed by her old friend Sarah's house, once a bright yellow with white shutters, now dull and worn, the paint peeling away. Lena stopped for a moment, her hand lingering on the old iron fence that separated the yard from the street. A faint memory flashed in her mind, Sarah laughing, the two of them running down the sidewalk together, their school bags bouncing on their shoulders. But that was before she was taken, before the grave. Her throat tightened. Sarah's house looked deserted. No lights flickered behind the windows, no sign of movement. There was no one left. Lena turned away, forcing herself to keep moving. She couldn't let herself fall apart, not now. She needed answers. Just as she reached the corner of her street, she heard a faint sound. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then it came again, a door creaking open. Lena froze. A shadow appeared at the end of the street, the outline of a figure silhouetted against the dimming sky. Her heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? There had been no one in sight for miles, and now, here was someone emerging from the dark. The figure was tall, slender, and cloaked in a heavy jacket that seemed to blend into the shadows. As they walked closer, Lena's breath hitched. They weren't moving like a normal person. It was almost as if they were gliding, not walking. When they came into full view, Lena gasped. The person's face was covered by a dark mask, like the ones worn by bandits in old Western films. The eyes, however, were strikingly clear, shining with an unnatural brightness that made Lena's blood run cold. "Who are you?" Lena called out, her voice shaking, yet determined. The figure stopped a few feet from her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the person's voice came. soft but firm, as if it carried some weight from beyond the grave. "I'm not the one you should be asking, but if you want answers, come with me." Lena hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to run. She didn't know if this person could be trusted or if they were another part of the nightmare she had just escaped. But something about them, something in their eyes, made Lena feel like they might be her only hope. "I'm not going anywhere with you unless you tell me who you are," Lena replied, her voice a little steadier now. The figure tilted their head, almost as if they were amused by her answer. "I'm someone who knows the truth about what happened to you, and I know what's happening now." Lena's heart pounded harder in her chest. "The truth? What do you mean? What's happening?" The person sighed, a sound that seemed to echo in the empty street. "You were never meant to escape. You were never meant to know. But now, it's too late." They stepped forward, the eerie mask hiding their expression, but Lena could feel the intensity of their gaze. "Come with me, and I'll show you the answers. You'll find what you're looking for, but only if you're ready." Lena swallowed, torn between fear and the desire for the truth. She wanted to run, to find her parents, to understand what had happened to her and her town. But part of her deep down knew that running wouldn't help her. The truth was out there, and it was waiting for her. She took a deep breath. "All right, I'll follow you." Without a word, the masked figure turned and started walking toward the abandoned neighborhood. Lena followed closely behind, her legs still weak from her ordeal in the grave. Every step felt like a battle, but the fire inside her burned brighter than her fear. They passed house after house, desolate, untouched for years. Lena's mind raced. It didn't make sense. She had been buried alive, but now she was standing here, walking down her old street, as if time had stood still for everyone else except her. The masked figure led her to a house at the end of the block. It was different from the others. No boarded-up windows, no neglected yard. The house was pristine, almost as if someone still lived there. The figure stopped in front of the front door and turned to Lena. "We're here." Lena's eyes scanned the house, confused. "This house looks normal. Who lives here?" "You'll understand soon enough," the figure said, their voice calm, almost soothing. "But first, you need to meet someone." The door creaked open, and before Lena could ask another question, a woman appeared in the doorway. She was older than Lena remembered, with dark circles under her eyes. But the moment Lena saw her, she felt a strange sense of familiarity. The woman's eyes widened in shock. "Lena, is it really you?" Lena's breath caught in her throat. Who are you?" I'm your mother's sister, your aunt, Caroline." Lena blinked, trying to piece together the sudden onslaught of emotions. Her mother's sister. She didn't even know she had an aunt. Her father had never mentioned her, and Lena couldn't remember ever hearing anyone talk about her. Caroline stepped forward, her face filled with both joy and sorrow. "I thought I'd never see you again. I thought you were gone forever." Lena shook her head, still in shock. "What happened to everyone? Where's my mum, my dad? Where is everybody?" Caroline's expression darkened. She stepped back into the house, gesturing for Lena to follow. "Come inside, I'll tell you everything. But you need to know, Lena, things are not what they seem. Not anymore." Lena followed her into the house, her heart beating faster. She could feel the weight of the past 6 years bearing down on her with every step. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and coffee, an odd comfort that made Lena's throat tighten with longing for a life she thought was lost forever. Once inside, Caroline closed the door behind them and led Lena to a small living room. Space was warm, with a soft glow from a few lamps, and everything appeared strangely ordinary. But there was a tension in the air, a heaviness that Lena couldn't shake. "Sit down," Caroline said, motioning to the couch. "I need to explain everything." Lena sat, her mind spinning with questions. What's going on? Why is the town abandoned? Why did I come back to this place? Caroline sat across from her, wringing her hands in her lap. "Lena, everything you think you know about your life, about your disappearance, about your family has been a lie." Lena's eyes widened. "A lie?" Caroline nodded slowly. "The truth is, your parents were involved in something dangerous. And when you were taken that day, it wasn't just random. You were part of something bigger, something that's been brewing for years." Lena shook her head, confusion and disbelief clouding her thoughts. "What do you mean? I don't understand." "The town," Caroline's voice faltered. "The town is part of an experiment, and you were the key." Lena's breath caught in her throat. "The Key to what? Caroline's eyes flicked nervously to the door, as if she feared someone might be listening. The key to changing everything. The key to rewriting the past. And now, they know you're alive. Lena felt the ground beneath her feet begin to shift. She had come here seeking answers, but this was more than she could have ever imagined. Before Lena could ask another Caroline's face went as pale as the walls surrounding her. The air in the room turned icy. She stood frozen for Caroline's face, her eyes wide with fear. Before rushing to the window beside the door, Lena could see her aunt's hands trembling as she peered through the blinds, her breath shallow. "They know we're here," Caroline whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's too soon. I wasn't expecting them this quickly." Lena's pulse quickened, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. Who were these people, and why did they want her? She glanced at the door again, hearing the knock once more. This time, louder, more insistent. The doorframe rattled under the force of the knock. The sound seemed to vibrate through her chest, and she instinctively stepped back, her body tensing. The fear was palpable in the room, now thick and heavy, suffocating everything it touched. Caroline's face twisted in desperation. She quickly glanced over at Lena, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and sorrow. "Listen to me, Lena, you have to leave now." Lena shook her head, confused and scared. "What's happening? Who are they?" Caroline grabbed Lena's arm, her grip tight. "They're not human. They never were. You're in danger, and they're coming for you." Lena's heart skipped a beat as the truth finally started to sink in. She had felt it since the moment she left the grave. This wasn't just about a missing girl, it was about something far darker, something that had been waiting for her to return. But who or what were these people? The door rattled again, the wood groaning under the pressure. Caroline looked over at Lena one last time, her eyes pleading. "Go, you don't have much time. Head down the back way to the woods. I'll hold them off for as long as I can." Lena wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she could barely get the words out. Fear clamped her chest like a vice. She wasn't ready. She couldn't leave her only living family member to face whatever was coming. Caroline pushed her toward the back door. "Now, Lena, you have to go." Before Lena could protest further, Caroline threw open the door, revealing a dark hallway beyond. It was the only way out. Lena hesitated only for a moment before running toward it, her heart hammering against her ribs. The moment she stepped into the hallway, she heard the unmistakable sound of boots on the porch outside. The knock stopped instead. There was a strange, soft hum, like an electrical current running through the air. The sound sent a chill crawling up Lena's spine, and she instinctively ran faster. She sprinted through the narrow hallway, her legs barely keeping up with the panic surging through her body. She reached the back door, yanked it open, and was met with the cool night air. But as she stepped outside, she froze. The woods, the very same woods she had wandered through after escaping the grave, loomed before her, their trees stretching like dark, twisted fingers into the night sky. The path seemed to whisper in the wind, as though beckoning her to follow it. Lena glanced back at the house, where Caroline had disappeared. She couldn't see her aunt, but she could feel the presence of something, or someone, moving inside. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the walls of the house. Lena didn't have time to wait. Her heart told her she had to keep running, keep moving, or they would catch her. She stepped into the woods, each step sinking deeper into the night. The trees felt alive, most like they were watching her. The path was narrow, winding around massive roots that seemed to grow like snakes from the ground. The rustling leaves in the distance made her feel like she was being followed. And then, just as she was trying to shake off the unease, a voice echoed through the trees. Lena, it was her name, whispered softly in the breeze, and it sent a jolt of terror through her. It didn't sound like Caroline. It was colder, more distorted, like it came from somewhere deep inside the earth itself. Lena stopped in her tracks. Her breath was coming in ragged bursts, and she felt as if the very woods were closing in around her. She turned, eyes scanning the shadows. But there was nothing but darkness. She spun back to the path, ready to run again. But something caught her. Flash of movement, just a few feet ahead. She froze. A figure stepped out from the trees. It was tall and lean, cloaked in a long flowing robe. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, and in the dim light, all Lena could make out were its long bony hands. The figure's presence felt ancient, as if it had been standing there for centuries, waiting. Lena stepped backward, her heart hammering louder than ever. "Who are you? What do you want with me?" The figure's voice was deep, resonating through the trees like an echo. The key has returned. Lena's stomach dropped. The key? What do you mean? What do you want from me? The figure took a slow step toward her, its presence suffocating. You are the key, Lena Harper. The final piece. They will come for you soon, but it doesn't matter. There is no escaping it. Her mind raced. Who will come for me? The Covenant, the figure whispered, its voice like a soft wind through the leaves. They have been waiting for you, watching you. You are the one who will unlock the truth, but you are also the one who will destroy everything. Lena's chest tightened. Destroy everything. Her brain was spinning, trying to piece together what the figure had just said. The Covenant. What was that, and how was she connected to it? The answers were just out of reach. Like a puzzle she couldn't quite finish. But before she could ask another question, the figure lifted a hand, and a low, unnatural sound filled the air, a hum that vibrated through her body. It was like an electric charge, buzzing through the very air around her. Run, the figure said, its voice suddenly turning soft, almost sympathetic. You don't have much time. Lena didn't need to be told twice. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She turned and sprinted down the path, not daring to look back. As she ran, the trees seemed to stretch farther apart, the path becoming clearer, but at the same time, more dangerous. The air grew colder with each step, and every noise made her stop, holding her breath, straining to hear if she was being followed. Suddenly, she heard a distant shout, then another, and another. The sound was getting closer. The voices, they were human. No, not human. Lena's heart skipped a beat. She knew they were close now. She could feel them, like shadows just behind her, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. But the path ahead was narrowing, the trees closing in, and the darkness felt like it was swallowing her whole. Every breath she took felt heavier than the last. Every movement was harder, slower, and then she heard its footsteps behind her, closing in. Lena looked over her shoulder just as a figure lunged at her. Dare look back fully, but she could hear the relentless footsteps, the sound of someone or something gaining on her. I can't outrun them, she thought desperately. I have to do something. In one swift movement, she reached into her jacket pocket, where she had hidden the only thing she thought could save her, the small, polished stone Caroline had given her earlier. It had been given to her with little explanation, only a warning that it could protect her, though Caroline's exact words had been cryptic. Use it when the time comes. Well, the time had come. Lena didn't know what it would do, but in that moment of pure panic, she had no other choice. Without hesitation, she held the stone in both hands and squeezed tightly. Nothing happened at first. Then the world shifted. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, a strange force pulling at her from all directions. The footsteps behind her faltered, the figure's presence retreating. Lena's body was filled with a sudden rush of warmth, as if the stone were channeling something deep within her. Then a voice spoke in her head, familiar, like a whisper from her past. Lena, don't be afraid. Her mother's voice. She turned, her body moving of its own accord, and there, standing before her, was her mother, lithe, her face warm and radiant, as if no time had passed at all. But this wasn't just her mother. It was her mother's spirit, an echo of who she had been, reaching out from the past. Mum, Lena whispered, hardly daring to believe it. I've been watching you, her mother said softly. You are the key. You've always been. Tears welled in Lena's eyes. What is this? What's happening? Why didn't you come for me? Her mother's form looked down, as if in sorrow. I couldn't, Lena. We were part of something much bigger than we ever realized. The Covenant, your father. He made deals, traded lives, and you, Lena, you were the price. But now you have the chance to break free. Lena felt the weight of those words pressing against her chest. Her mind was spinning, but the love in her mother's voice grounded her. How do I break free? How do I stop this? Her mother smiled faintly. You've already begun. The stone. It's a part of you, a piece of the legacy that binds us all. You must make the choice, Lena. You must choose to end it, or the cycle will continue. Suddenly, the world around them began to distort, the air warping as the dark figure from the woods reappeared, looming like a shadow over them. The hum of its power filled the space, but this time, Lena stood firm. She wasn't running anymore. I don't need to run, Lena said, her voice clear, strong, and unwavering. I'm done being the key to someone else's game. With a final, powerful surge of energy, Lena lifted the stone high above her head. The light that radiated from it pierced the darkness, glowing brighter and brighter, until the figure before her shrieked in agony, its form twisting and distorting as the light consumed it. The ground trembled beneath her, the trees shaking as the very earth seemed to split open. And then, just as suddenly as it had all started, the figure vanished. The oppressive feeling in the air lifted, leaving only silence in its wake. Lena stood there, breathless, her heart racing, but the stone in her hands now a dull grey. The hum of energy had stopped. The nightmare was over. Her mother's form began to fade, her voice echoing softly one last time. "You're free, Lena. You've broken the cycle. The past no longer holds you." As the image of her mother disappeared completely, Lena felt the weight of everything that had happened lift from her shoulders. She was no longer the prisoner of a past that wasn't hers to begin with. She was free. The curse had been broken. Lena collapsed to her knees, exhaustion overtaking her. Her body was battered, her mind spent, but the overwhelming sense of peace that washed over her told her that she had done the right thing. The future was in her hands now, and for the first time in 6 years, she felt hope. The moral of the story: sometimes we find ourselves bound by forces beyond our control that try to dictate our fate, but the greatest power lies within us, the power to choose our path, to break free from the chains of the past, and to forge our own future. Never let the darkness of our past dictate the light of our future. The strength to overcome adversity lies not in escaping it, but in facing it head-on and choosing to change the course of our lives. Let's open another file of story. The boy who vanished walking home. No trace, no clues. Sounds good. Asterisk, let's start this story. It was a Wednesday afternoon when everything changed for Ben Carter. He had just finished his last class of the day at Willow Creek Middle School. As usual, he grabbed his backpack, waved goodbye to his friends, and started walking home. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban neighborhood. Ben enjoyed the walk. It was peaceful, just him, the sound of his sneakers tapping the pavement, and the occasional chirp of a bird from the nearby trees. He was a regular 12-year-old, nothing too special about him. He liked video games, playing soccer in the yard, and hanging out with his little sister Lily, who was always up to some kind of mischief. Ben didn't think much about the world around him as he strolled home that day, but little did he know that was the last time anyone would ever see him again. Ben's parents, Jim and Laura Carter, didn't realize something was wrong until dinner time. They were used to Ben coming home around 4:30 p.m., but by 6 o'clock, he still hadn't walked through the door. Laura glanced at Jim, her face filled with worry. "Jim, where is Ben? This isn't like him." Jim frowned and checked his phone. No messages from Ben. He tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. "Maybe he's hanging out with friends or stopped by the park," Jim said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'll go look for him." But as Jim drove around the neighborhood, he found no sign of Ben. He pulled up to the school, thinking maybe his son had stayed late for some reason, but the parking lot was empty. His heart began to race. By 8 p.m., the panic was setting in. Ben was gone. The police were called, and by nightfall, the search for Ben Carter had begun. Officers from the Willow Creek Police Department went door to door, talking to neighbors, checking every inch of the neighborhood. Dogs were brought in to search for scent trails, and helicopters scanned the area from above. But there was nothing. No clues. No trace of Ben anywhere. The next day the search intensified. Flyers with Ben's picture were put up at every street corner. His face was all over the news, and soon the story spread to every local television station. People came from neighboring towns to help search the woods behind the school, the empty lots near the mall, and the parks where Ben often played. But there was no sign of him. It had been 3 days when the first clue appeared, though it was far from what anyone expected. It was a single, white sneaker. Ben's sneaker found in the bushes behind the local library. It was clean, without a speck of dirt on it, and appeared almost too neatly placed, as if someone had carefully left it there. No one knew what to make of it. It didn't seem to fit any of the theories they had been working on. Was it a clue, or was it just another strange twist in a case that made no sense? Ben's family was devastated. His little sister Lily couldn't understand why her big brother hadn't come home. Every night, she'd sit at the window, waiting for him to walk through the door. Laura couldn't stop crying, and Jim spent every waking moment searching for his son, calling out for help from anyone who might have seen something, anything. Then, on the fourth day, something happened that none of them expected. The phone rang. It was a strange number. Jim answered it, his voice shaking. "Hello." A low voice on the other end spoke slowly, deliberately. "Your son is still alive, but you need to act quickly." Jim's heart dropped into his stomach. "Who is this? Where is Ben?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, it said, "You can find him, but only if you follow the clues." Before Jim could say anything else, the line went dead. The next morning, the search began again, this time with a new urgency. The police were still baffled, unsure if the call was a prank or something far more serious, but Jim believed it was real. He had no choice. His son was out there somewhere. Jim, Laura, and the police scoured the neighborhood once more, retracing Ben's steps from the day he disappeared. The more they searched, the more they realized something strange. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence that Ben had been kidnapped. There was no reason why a 12-year-old boy would vanish without a trace, as if he had simply disappeared into thin air. Then, while walking past the alley behind the grocery store, something caught Jim's eye. It was another clue, a crumpled note, tucked under a pile of leaves. He bent down and picked it up, his hands trembling. The note was written in sloppy handwriting. "The woods, 10 p.m. be there." Jim felt a shiver run down his spine. The woods. What did this mean? Was this another message from whoever had taken Ben? He turned to Laura, who was standing nearby, her face pale with fear. "It's a clue. We have to go to the woods tonight." Laura nodded, her eyes wide. "But what if it's a trap?" "We have no choice," Jim said firmly, his jaw set in determination. "We have to find Ben." That evening, Jim and Laura, along with a few of the police officers, drove to the edge of the dark woods behind the town. It was nearly 10 p.m. when they arrived, and the air was thick with the sound of crickets and the rustle of trees swaying. In the wind, the woods looked different at night, darker and more ominous. It felt like something was lurking just out of sight. Jim's heart raced as he stepped out of the car, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Ben," he shouted. "Ben, if you're out here, we're coming to find you." There was no answer, just the soft echo of his voice bouncing off the trees. They ventured deeper into the woods, the beam of their flashlights cutting through the thick underbrush. For what seemed like hours, they searched, calling Ben's name, checking every corner of the woods. But there was no sign of him. Nothing. Finally, Jim was about to give up when something unusual caught his eye. A strange mark on one of the trees. It looked like a series of slashes, deep, jagged cuts carved into the bark. "This wasn't here before," Jim muttered, kneeling down to examine it. "It's fresh." The officers gathered around, their faces grim. The cuts were too deliberate to be natural, and the pattern seemed to form a kind of symbol that none of them recognized. "What do you think it means?" one of the officers asked. "I don't know," Jim said, frustration building in his chest. "But I think it's connected to Ben. Whoever did this knows something we don't." Suddenly, there was a rustling sound in the trees. Jim froze, his heart leaping into his throat. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, tall and thin, his face obscured by a dark hood. He didn't move like anyone Jim had seen before. There was a strange calmness about him, like he was in control of the situation. "You're looking for your son," the man said, his voice soft but filled with an eerie authority. "I can help you find him." Jim took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone. "Who are you? What do you know about Ben?" The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "You won't find him without my help, but I'll tell you this, there's a reason he vanished. He's part of something much bigger than you can imagine. And if you want to see him again, you'll have to be prepared for the truth." Jim swallowed hard. "What are you talking about? Where is my son?" The man nodded slowly. "Follow me, and I'll show you. But be warned, what you discover will change everything." Jim hesitated for a moment, then looked at Laura. She was pale, clutching his arm tightly, but she nodded silently. "We'll follow you," Jim said. "But if you're lying to us," the man raised a hand, cutting him off. "I'm not lying, but you might not like what you learn." The man led them deeper into the woods, through a maze of twisted trees and hidden paths, until they reached a small clearing. There, in the center, was an old weathered stone altar. And on the altar, there was something that made Jim's blood run cold. A single, blood-red rose. The man gestured toward it. This is where your son's fate was sealed. Jim's heart stopped. What does this have to do with Ben? The man turned, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Your son is part of an ancient ritual, one that's been passed down for generations. He was chosen, and now the time has come for him to fulfill his destiny. Jim stood frozen, his mouth dry. The air felt heavier as the man's words echoed in his mind. Chosen, Jim repeated, barely able to process what he was hearing. What are you talking about? What kind of ritual? My son has nothing to do with. Before he could finish his sentence, the man raised a hand, silencing him. The ritual, the man said, his voice cold and unsettling, is an ancient one. It's been practiced in Willow Creek for centuries, hidden in plain sight. Every few generations, a child is chosen, someone with a special connection to the land. Ben was chosen, just like the others before him. Jim's mind spun as he tried to make sense of the situation. What do you mean, chosen? Why him? Why Ben? The man's lips curled into a thin smile. It's not about why him, it's about the balance of power, life, and death. The ritual allows the community to thrive, to maintain prosperity, and Ben is the final piece. He is the one who will complete the cycle. Laura gasped, her face pale. You're saying Ben is, what a sacrifice. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the altar, his boots crunching softly on the dried leaves beneath him. He glanced back at Jim and Laura, his eyes darker now, almost hollow. I told you, he said, his voice colder. You might not like what you learn, but there's no turning back now. Before Jim could say anything else, the ground beneath them trembled. A low hum, almost imperceptible at first, began to fill the air. It seemed to come from the very earth beneath their feet. The trees around the clearing swayed, though there was no wind. Then, from the darkness beyond the clearing, several figures appeared, shadows moving in perfect synchrony, their faces hidden beneath cloaks. As they entered the light, Jim noticed something chilling. Their eyes, just like the man's, glowed faintly, an unnatural light. Their presence sent a wave of dread crashing over him. Who are they? Laura whispered, clutching Jim's arm. They are the Watchers, the man replied, without looking at her. They've been keeping the ritual alive for generations, and now it's time. Jim's heart raced, his thoughts running wild. He had to think, he had to find a way out of this. But what could they do against something so ancient, so powerful? One of the figures, the tallest of them, stepped forward. Beneath their hood, Jim could just make out a sharp, angular face, cold as stone. Their voice was low, almost melodic, as they spoke. The time has come, Benjamin Carter. The figure intoned, though their eyes never shifted from the altar. The land calls for you, Benjamin. Jim echoed, stunned. You know where my son is. You've taken him. The figure's head tilted slightly, as if considering the question. We do not take children, we choose them, and the land has chosen him. The boy is already part of the ritual, whether you accept it or not. Jim stepped forward, desperation clouding his judgment. Where is my son? Tell me. The tall figure reached up, pushing back their hood, revealing a face that seemed far older than anyone Jim had ever seen. Their eyes gleamed with an unsettling calm. He's close enough for you to reach, but not yet ready to return. You cannot rush the process, Mr. Carter. The ritual must unfold as it was meant to. The man in the shadows, the one who had led them here, turned sharply to the Watcher. Enough. Let them see the truth. The tall Watcher raised a hand, and instantly, a light flickered from the stone altar, casting eerie shadows across the clearing. The ground shook more violently now, and Jim felt a sudden pull in the pit of his stomach, as though something deep inside him was trying to force him to look away. But he couldn't. He had to know where his son was. The light from the altar grew brighter, and then there he was. Ben. For a moment, Jim couldn't believe his eyes. His son stood there, in the center of the altar, his face pale but peaceful. He was no longer the boy he remembered. There was a strange, almost otherworldly stillness about him. His eyes, wide and vacant, seemed to shimmer with an unspoken power, as if they were seeing something far beyond the mortal world. Ben, Jim called out, his voice cracking with emotion. Ben, can you hear me? It's Dad. We're here. We've come to take you home. Ben didn't respond. Instead, his eyes flicked to the tall figure standing near the altar, as if awaiting some silent command. The tall watcher spoke softly, almost lovingly, to Ben. The transformation is almost complete. Soon, you will be one with the land, with the power that sustains it. Jim's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Transformation? What's happening to my son? What did you do to him? The man in the shadows, the one who had first spoken to them, stepped forward, his face serious now. He's not the same boy you remember. The ritual is changing him. It will change him into something greater, something that has existed long before you and your son were born. Laura's hand shot to her mouth as realization began to dawn. You mean he's becoming part of this ritual? The figure nodded solemnly. Yes, Ben is the vessel, the key. He will carry the power of the land and the watchers within him, and once the ritual is complete, he will become something beyond human. Jim's mind raced, his thoughts clouded with horror. His son, no, their son, was being transformed into something they didn't understand, something ancient and dangerous. What happens if we stop this? Jim asked, his voice trembling with fear. The watcher's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach their eyes. If you interfere, the land will turn against you, and not just you, everyone. The ritual must be completed. If you attempt to stop it, your entire town will pay the price. Jim's stomach turned. They were telling him that he had no choice, but Ben was his son. He couldn't just let them do this to him. He had to find a way to stop it. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air, soft but clear, coming from behind them. Stop, don't let them do this. Everyone turned, and through the trees stepped another figure, a woman, tall and commanding, her eyes locked onto the altar. She had an air of authority about her, and the watchers seemed to step back slightly, as if they were afraid of her. Who are you? Jim asked, his confusion growing. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked directly at the watchers. You've been hiding in the shadows for far too long. This ritual ends now. The tall watcher raised their hand, but the woman held up her own, and the air around them seemed to pulse with an almost electric force. A strange hum filled the clearing, and for the first time, Jim saw the watchers hesitate. You can't stop it, the watcher said, their voice strained. We'll see about that. The woman replied, her voice filled with unwavering certainty. With a swift motion, she raised her hand, and a burst of energy shot toward the altar. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the light from the altar flickered violently. Ben's body jerked, his eyes snapping open, glowing with an unnatural light. But then, something unexpected happened. Ben began to scream. Ben's scream echoed through the clearing, high and piercing, cutting through the tense air like a knife. Jim's heart pounded in his chest as he rushed toward his son. Ben, it's me. It's your dad, Jim shouted, his voice breaking, but Ben didn't respond. His body shook violently, and his glowing eyes, filled with pain and fear, locked onto Jim's face. It was as if he was there but not there, his body, his face, but something else inside him. The transformation was happening, and it wasn't something Jim could reverse with just a touch or a simple prayer. The woman who had stepped into the clearing, her presence still crackling with energy, didn't move. She was watching the ritual unfold, her face set with determination, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. The tall watcher stepped forward, eyes glowing brighter now. You cannot stop this. It is already done. The land has claimed him. The ritual is too powerful. You cannot fight fate. But Jim wasn't listening anymore. He reached out to Ben, gripping his shoulders. Ben, listen to me. You have to fight this. I know you're in there, son. You can't let them do this to you. Ben's scream escalated, and suddenly, his body went still. His eyes flickered, their glow dimming just slightly. The woman stepped forward then, her eyes locked on the watchers. She raised her hands, and a new force surged through the air. No more. The ritual ends now. The watchers recoiled as if something was pushing them back. The earth rumbled beneath their feet as cracks appeared in the ground, widening like hungry mouths. Ben's body jerked once more, and with it, a sharp, almost unnatural crack tore through the night air. The altar began to crumble, the stone splitting as if it were made of nothing but dust. The ritual's energy was unraveling. Jim gripped his son tighter, his heart pounding with both fear and hope. He didn't know if it was too late, if he could pull Ben back from whatever dark force had taken him, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. Ben gasped, his eyes darting around. The glow in them was fading. His voice, weak and trembling, broke through the silence. Dad, I'm here. Jim's heart swelled with relief, and he pulled Ben into his arms. "You're here, Ben, you're alive." The woman, still glowing with energy, lowered her hands. Her gaze softened for a moment as she looked at Jim and Ben. "The power is broken. The ritual has been stopped. But Ben isn't fully free yet. He still carries the mark of the land within him." "What does that mean?" Laura cried, running to Ben's side. "Is he going to be okay? Will he be normal again?" The woman stepped closer, her face full of compassion. "Ben's transformation was never meant to be permanent. He carries the power now, but the bond can be severed, but it will take time." Ben's eyes fluttered as he collapsed into his father's arms, exhausted from the energy that had coursed through him. The land's hold on him was still there, but it was weakening. Jim, still holding his son tightly, felt the pull of the woman's words. "How do we break the bond? How do we free him?" The woman looked around at the watchers, her eyes hardening. "To break the bond, Ben must choose. He must sever his connection to the land, willingly. But it's not easy. The land will fight him, as it always does." Jim's eyes burned with unshed tears. "How much time does he have?" The woman shook her head. "I can't say, but as long as the watchers remain, the ritual will always be a part of him." Jim turned to face the cloaked figures standing at the edge of the clearing. They were watching, their glowing eyes never leaving Ben. The tall watcher stepped forward. "Again, you can't escape your fate, Benjamin Carter. The land will always call for you." But the woman raised her hand, her voice firm. "You've lost. The land will no longer claim him. Ben has a choice now. His fate is no longer in your hands." The watchers hesitated. For the first time, they seemed uncertain. Then, without a word, they turned and vanished into the darkness of the woods, leaving Jim and his family behind. The days that followed were long and difficult. Ben, though physically safe, struggled with the strange power still within him. It wasn't something he could simply push away. But with the help of the woman, the one who had stopped the ritual, Ben began to understand what had happened to him. She taught him how to control the land's power, how to quiet the voices that called to him in the night, and most importantly, she taught him how to choose his future, no matter what had been chosen for him before. The woman, who introduced herself as Celine, told Jim and Laura that Ben's story was far from unique. The land's power had taken many children before, but no one had ever broken the ritual in so long. Celine, it turned out, had once been part of the Watchers herself, but when she saw what they were doing to the children they chose, she turned against them, vowing to stop the rituals, no matter the cost. Ben Cellini told him one evening, as they sat by a fire, "You have the power to break the curse, but remember, you can only do this if you don't let the land control you. Choose for yourself." Ben nodded, though the weight of her words hung heavily in his heart. He had a future now, a future free from the ritual, but it would be up to him to decide who he would become. And with that choice, he understood the greatest lesson of all. The moral of the story: no matter how dark or difficult the circumstances may seem, we always have the power to choose our own path. Our past, our family's history, or the expectations of others may try to define us. But the true power lies in our ability to make our own choices and shape our own destiny. It's up to us to choose who we want to become and to break free from anything that holds us back, even when the world tells us otherwise. Ask ChatGPT. Let's open another file of ... Locked in a basement for 10 years, her escape story shocked the world. Let's start this story ... It all started on a bright, sunny afternoon in the quiet town of Oak Ridge, North Carolina. For most people, it was just another ordinary day. Children rode their bikes down the sidewalks, families ran errands, and the smell of freshly cut grass filled the air. But for 16-year-old Lily Harper, that ordinary day would change her life forever. Lily was a sweet, friendly girl who loved animals and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. She lived with her mom and dad in a cozy house on Maple Street, surrounded by kind neighbors. Life was peaceful, but everything came crashing down when she met a man named Thomas. Lily was on her way home from school when she first saw him. He was standing on the corner, near the park, looking like he was waiting for someone. He looked kind, with a soft smile and eyes that seemed to sparkle in the sunlight. He introduced himself as Thomas, a friend of her mum's, and told Lily her parents had asked him to pick her up from school because they had an emergency. Lily, always trusting, agreed without thinking twice. She hopped into his car, thinking everything was perfectly normal, but as the car drove further from her school, she started feeling uneasy. Something wasn't right. Thomas wasn't talking much, and the road ahead seemed unfamiliar. The sun was beginning to set, and Lily could see the houses getting fewer and farther apart. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We're almost there," Thomas replied, his smile never fading. "Your parents just needed some time to handle things. They told me you'd be fine." But Lily didn't feel fine. She felt trapped. She tried to open the car door, but it was locked. She tried to scream, but the words didn't come. Fear gripped her chest, and her mind raced as she realized that this man wasn't a friend of her parents. He was a stranger. As the car continued down a narrow dirt road, the trees around them grew thicker, blocking the last rays of sunlight. Eventually, the car stopped in front of an old, dilapidated house. The windows were boarded up, and the paint on the door was chipped and peeling. "We're here," Thomas said, his voice too calm, too cold. He turned to her with an unsettling smile. "Welcome to your new home." Lily's heart pounded in her chest as he opened the door and pulled her out of the car. She tried to fight, but he was too strong, dragging her up the creaky steps and through the door. The house smelled musty, and the air felt thick, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Lily struggled to breathe, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of what was happening. "What are you doing?" she screamed, her voice barely a whisper, hoarse from fear. But Thomas didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her down a dark hallway, towards a narrow staircase that led to the basement. The stairs creaked under their weight, and as they descended, the temperature seemed to drop. When they reached the bottom, Thomas shoved her into a small, dimly lit room. There were no windows, just a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were concrete, cold and damp, and the air smelled stale. The floor was covered with a thin mattress, and there was a small metal door in the far corner. "No," Lily screamed, backing away from him, her mind racing. "Please, let me go. I won't tell anyone, I promise." But Thomas only chuckled, a low, mocking sound. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "This is your home now." Lily's world crumbled around her as he locked the door, leaving her alone in the darkness. For the next 10 years, Lily would live in that basement, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Thomas kept her hidden from the world, telling her that no one would ever find her. He brought her food and water, but never any comfort. He kept her isolated, in the cold, dark basement, where time seemed to move slowly. She was never allowed to leave, never allowed to see the sunlight again. As the years passed, Lily's mind began to break. She lost track of the days, the weeks, the months. The only thing she could hold on to was the small window of hope that one day someone would find her. But that hope seemed to fade with every passing day. Thomas would come down, occasionally to check on her, always with that same cold smile. Sometimes he would tell her that she was a part of something bigger, something important. But Lily didn't understand what he meant. She only knew that she wanted to escape. Every night she would dream of running through fields, feeling the grass under her feet and the wind in her hair. But every morning she would wake up in the same cold, dark room, her dreams shattered. Then, one day, something changed. It was the same as any other day, except that something inside Lily stirred. She felt a strange sense of urgency, as if today might be different. Maybe this time she could escape. For the first time in years, Lily began to make a plan. She started watching everything around her, every sound, every movement. She noticed the cracks in the walls, the loose floorboards, the small gaps in the door. For the first time in 10 years, she felt a flicker of hope. But it wouldn't be easy. Thomas was always watching her, always controlling every move she made. He knew she was smart, knew she had the strength to fight back if she had the chance. That's why he kept her in the basement where she couldn't escape. But Lily was determined. She knew she had to find a way out, no matter the cost. Then, one night, after Thomas had left her alone, Lily saw it. A small piece of metal was lying on the floor next to the door. It was old, rusty, and jagged, but it was sharp enough to be useful. She grabbed it with trembling hands, her heart racing as she worked to pry the door open. It took hours, and her hands were raw and bleeding, but Lily didn't care. She couldn't stop now. Finally, with a loud creak, the door opened just wide enough for her to slip through. Her pulse raced as she stepped out into the hallway, her breath coming in quick gasps. The house was eerily quiet. It was dark, but Lily could hear the sound of Thomas's footsteps upstairs. She had no time to think. She had to move. Slowly and quietly, She crept through the house, her heart thumping in her chest. Every floorboard that creaked felt like a loud shout, but she pushed forward, determined to escape. She reached the front door, and as she opened it, the cool night air hit her like a wave. She was free. For the first time in 10 years, Lily stepped outside. The world had changed, but she didn't care. She had one goal in mind: survival. She ran into the night, knowing that Thomas would be looking for her. She didn't know where to go, but she couldn't stop now. She ran until her legs ached, until she could no longer hear the sound of Thomas's footsteps behind her. She didn't stop until she reached the nearest house, where the lights were on and the door was open. She collapsed on the doorstep, exhausted to say anything. The door swung open, and a woman's voice called out, "Are you okay? What happened?" Lily didn't have the strength to answer. All she could do was cry. When the police arrived, they immediately recognized her. They had been searching for Lily Harper for years, but they had never found a trace of her. They had never known what had happened to the sweet, quiet girl who had disappeared without a word. But now, after 10 long years, Lily's story would be heard. The news of her escape spread like wildfire. People from all over the world were shocked by what she had endured. Her courage, her strength, and her determination to survive were the things that inspired millions. The story of the girl who escaped from the basement and survived 10 years of captivity was something that no one would ever forget. But even as the world learned her story, Lily knew that her journey was far from over. She had a long road ahead of her, filled with healing and recovery. But no matter what, she knew one thing for sure: she had finally escaped the nightmare, and nothing would ever take away her freedom again. The days that followed Lily's escape were a blur of interviews, therapy, and a flood of emotions. She was a hero in the eyes of the world, but for her, it felt as though she had just woken up from a nightmare that still hadn't fully ended. While she was safe now, she carried the weight of those 10 long years in the basement, and the trauma was far from over. The first few nights in the hospital were the hardest. Lily couldn't sleep. Every sound seemed to make her flinch, and every shadow felt like a threat. The doctors and nurses were kind, always checking on her, but they couldn't understand what she had gone through. Only a few people could. Among those who came to see her was Detective Olivia Wright. Olivia was a seasoned investigator, known for her sharp mind and dedication to solving even the most difficult cases. She had been part of the search for Lily when she went missing 10 years ago. She had never stopped looking, even when hope seemed to fade. When she first met Lily in the hospital, she could see the fear and confusion in the girl's eyes, but she could also see something else: strength. Olivia didn't push Lily to talk. She let her have her space, understanding that it would take time. Instead, she started by asking the simple questions, things that Lily might remember about her captor, things that might help them find him. Lily wasn't ready to talk about it. She couldn't. Every time she thought about the man who had locked her away, her mind went blank. It was as if her brain couldn't even process his face. She remembered bits and pieces: his cold eyes, the way he spoke, the feeling of being trapped. But the details were foggy, like a dream she couldn't quite remember. One afternoon, as Lily sat in her hospital room, staring out the window, a knock came at the door. She turned to see a woman standing in the doorway, her face kind but serious. The woman was in her late 30s, dressed in a simple blouse and slacks, her dark hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. She smiled at Lily and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Emma Brooks. I'm a therapist, and I've been assigned to help you through this." She spoke softly, her voice warm and understanding. "How are you feeling?" Lily hesitated. She wasn't sure how to answer. The truth was, she didn't know how she was feeling. She felt lost, disconnected from the world she had once known. "I don't know," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't think I'll ever be okay." Emma nodded sympathetically. "It's okay to feel that way. You've been through something unimaginable, Lily, but we'll take it one step at a time. All right, we're not going to rush you. We'll work through this together." Lily didn't know why, but she felt a small sense of relief in Emma's words. For the first time since her escape, she felt like someone understood. She didn't have to explain herself. Emma just knew that healing would take time, and that was something Lily wasn't used to hearing. As the days passed, Olivia and Emma became fixtures in Lily's life. Olivia continued to search for any clue that could lead them to Thomas, the man who had kept Lily captive for all those years. She scoured old records, interviewed neighbors, and dug through evidence from the past, but Thomas had disappeared without a trace. No one knew where he had gone after he left Lily in that basement. It was as if he had vanished off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, Emma worked with Lily to help her process what had happened. She never pushed her too hard but gently guided her through different coping techniques. She taught Lily how to ground herself when she felt overwhelmed, how to control her breathing when anxiety hit, and how to talk about her trauma when she was ready. It wasn't easy. Every day was a challenge, but with Emma's help, Lily slowly began to take the first steps toward healing. One evening, a breakthrough came. Lily was sitting on the edge of her hospital bed, flipping through an old photo album that her parents had brought to her. She was looking at pictures of herself as a little girl before everything changed. She was smiling, laughing, her face full of joy. It was hard to imagine she had ever been that happy, but seeing those pictures made her realize something important. "I used to love reading," Lily said quietly, almost to herself. Emma, who had been sitting by her side, looked up. "You did?" Lily nodded. "I used to spend hours in the library, reading about animals. I always wanted to help them. I thought I'd be a veterinarian one day." "That's amazing," Emma said, smiling gently. "You know, it's never too late to follow your dreams. You've been through so much, but you still have that spark in you. It's still there." Lily looked at Emma, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Do you think I could still do it, even after everything?" "I know you can," Emma said, her voice full of conviction. "You've got that fire in you, Lily, and we'll work together to help you find your way." But just as Lily was beginning to feel like she might be able to take back control of her life, a phone call from Detective Olivia interrupted the moment. "I need you to come to the station," Olivia said urgently. "We found something you need to see." Lily's heart raced. What could they have found? Could it be about Thomas? She glanced at Emma, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I'll come with you," Emma said, standing up. "You don't have to do this alone." When Lily and Emma arrived at the police station, they were led into a small interrogation room. Olivia was waiting for them, a folder in her hands. She looked serious, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes that Lily hadn't seen before. "We found something," Olivia said, opening the folder. "It's a lead. We've been going through old surveillance footage, and we found something strange, something that might be a clue." Lily leaned forward, her heart pounding. Olivia pulled out a series of still images from a surveillance camera at a gas station, just a few miles away from the house where Lily had been kept. The pictures were grainy, but they clearly showed a man, the same man who had kidnapped Lily, and he wasn't alone. "There's someone with him," Olivia said, pointing to the figure beside Thomas. The second person was wearing a hoodie, their face hidden in shadow. But the way they stood close to Thomas, the way they seemed to move together, suggested that this person had been involved in Lily's captivity. Lily's mind raced. Who was this second person? Was Thomas working with someone else? Could this new figure help lead them to where Thomas had gone? Lily's mind whirled as she stared at the blurry photograph. The man she had been terrified of for 10 years. Thomas was standing next to someone she didn't recognize. The figure was masked in shadow, but Lily's instincts told her this person was just as dangerous as Thomas. "We've been tracking the second figure for a few weeks," Olivia said, her voice steady but urgent. "We believe this person may be involved in other cases from years ago, missing persons, unsolved disappearances." She pointed to the blurry image on the screen. "We're running facial recognition on all the footage we have, but we need your help. Lily, do you recognize anything? Any detail that stands out?" Lily looked closely at the image, her heart pounding. For a moment, all she could see was the fear and darkness of those 10 years in the basement. But then something clicked. A memory, a small detail. "The shoes," she said quietly. "The person in the hoodie. They were wearing red sneakers. I remember seeing red sneakers ... Double quotes. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Red sneakers. Yes," Lily said, nodding. "I remember the sound of them on the concrete floor when they would come down the stairs. They were always too loud ... Like they didn't care if I heard them." The detective immediately jotted down the detail. "Okay, this is good. It's something we can work with." Lily felt a weight lift off her shoulders for the first time in a long while. She had helped them. She had finally contributed something that might bring her closer to the truth, something that could help them find Thomas and this new person. But as the days went by, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The authorities were moving quickly, gathering more evidence. Yet, Lily was still struggling to rebuild her own life. The trauma of those 10 years lingered. And even though she had started therapy and received all the support she could handle, her mind was still haunted by the basement, the dark walls, and the feeling of being locked away. Emma continued to help her. Every day, Emma would sit with her, talking through what Lily had been through and working on healing strategies. And every day, Lily fought to reclaim the part of herself that had been taken from her: her independence, her dreams, and, most of all, her sense of safety. One afternoon, as the police continued their search, they came back with more news. They had tracked down the identity of the second person in the photograph, a man named David Turner. Lily's blood ran cold when she heard the name. Turner. Could it be? Was it possible? "Lily, are you sure?" Olivia asked gently. "We need to be certain. This man David Turner, he's been involved in some of the worst cases in this area, but we need you to confirm it." Lily's heart raced. Her mind was flooded with memories of the basement, of the dark and quiet hours, the endless isolation. She had never seen this man's face, but she had heard his voice a few times. He had a deep, gravelly voice that sounded familiar, even though she couldn't place it. "David Turner," Lily whispered, as if the name itself carried a weight. "I don't know who he is, but the voice, it sounds familiar. I think I heard it sometimes." The pieces were falling into place. Detective Olivia knew that they were close for comfort. The investigation had been gaining steam, and the leads were stacking up. Weeks passed, and Lily kept in touch with Emma and Olivia, working through her feelings and continuing her therapy. Slowly, she began to find a new normal. But every time she heard a siren or saw a police car, her heart would race. She wasn't sure she'd ever feel truly safe again. And then, one evening, the call came. The police had found Thomas. They had tracked him down to a small apartment on the outskirts of town. With the help of Lily's detailed description and the clues they had uncovered, they had finally cornered him. But they had no sign of David Turner. When the police raided the apartment, they found Thomas Burt. David Turner was nowhere to be found. As it turned out, David had been using several aliases for years, staying off the grid. He was more elusive than anyone had imagined. But the discovery of Thomas was a victory in itself. Thomas was arrested and charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, and a list of other crimes. The world watched as his trial unfolded in the news. For Lily, it was an emotional roller coaster. She had finally found some closure, but it didn't come without its struggles. One day, after everything had settled down, Lily sat alone on the porch of her family home. Her parents had been by her side through every step of the healing process. They had supported her, never giving up hope. And now, as she watched the sunset, she realized that her life was slowly starting to take shape again. She wasn't the same person she had been 10 years ago, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. She had survived the unimaginable. She had escaped. As time passed, Lily found a sense of peace. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But she had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting it, was about moving forward, step by step. She had made it through the darkest of times, and that was a strength she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The world had watched her story, and it had inspired so many people, those who had suffered in silence, those who were still fighting their own battles. Lily became an advocate for survivors, using her voice to bring attention to the horrors of captivity and the strength of the human spirit. Moral of the story: no matter how dark the days may seem, hope is always there. Even in the most unimaginable circumstances, strength can be found within ourselves. The journey to healing is never easy, but with courage, support, and determination, we can overcome the hardest challenges. And most importantly, we should never give up on the belief that we can reclaim our freedom, no matter what the past may hold.